السلام عليكم ورحمة الله, Mizi.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you, Abdurrahman?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good, alhamdulillah. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for accepting to to have you. I'm really happy to have you today. So this is part of a new series, English series I'm doing especially for the French community, but it's open to everyone. The goal is to introduce the Muslim community to what's happening around the world, how Muslims are organized around the world, what's happening. So I have handpicked a couple of people. Uh, and you're amongst them. Alhamdulillah, I'm very happy to have you. Thanks again
Thank you.
for joining us. Um, as a first question, Mizi, I would like you to introduce yourself quickly. Like, who are you? Where are you from? Where did you grow up? And what are you doing?
All right. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So my name is Mizi Wahid. My full name is Muhammad Tarmizi bin Abdul Wahid. I'm Singaporean, born in Singapore, raised in Singapore. I'm a graduate of Al-Azhar University from Cairo, Egypt. I worked for a bit in the Islamic Religious Council of Singapore, also known as MUIS. Left in 2009, and then I started my own company called Safinah Institute, where we teach Islam in English to the Singaporean community initially, but now more to the region. And we do all sorts of conferences, seminars, classes, workshops, retreats, mainly targeting the Muslim professionals, the graduates, the newlyweds, the young parents. And yeah, it's been around since 2009. So that's what most people, especially in Singapore, know me by. Like I run Safina Institute. But in the region, I think most people know me more as an author. So I've written a couple of books, Alhamdulillah, and some of them are the main ones that people normally talk about would be The Art of Letting God, Call Upon Him, and You Are Loved. And I also have a podcast, probably not as good as yours, Abdurrahman, but
Oh, it's
it's
probably better
called
than mine.
no, it's called the Mizi Wahid podcast. Before that, I had another podcast called the Good Life podcast. During COVID, I did a short-term project called the Circle of Knowledge, where I invited some of my friends who were also trained in Islamic studies to
Mm.
do different topics on Islam. And I think it was very well received because people were stuck at home, and they wanted to learn, they wanted to listen to something. Too
Uh-huh.
much screen time as well, so they just wanted to tune in and listen. So that's that. I'm married with four kids, Alhamdulillah.
Alright.
The eldest is 12, the youngest is 5. And I'm also active in the voluntary space in the amongst the Singaporean Muslim community. But I think
Uh-huh.
I'll share more about that later, inshallah.
Great. Um, Before talking about all of your activities, can you describe talk to us about about Singapore. I've been living in Singapore for 5 years. Unfortunately, we learn about each other really late in my stay in Singapore. But alhamdulillah, can you talk to? I had a lot of questions from friends and from other people about Singapore. A lot of misconceptions. People think that it's like a Muslim country, which is absolutely not true. People think it's like kind of like Malaysia, although there are a lot of Malays, but it's not like Malaysia at all. So can you talk to us about Singapore and the Muslim community in Singapore, please?
Sure. So Singapore is a very small nation. It's an island. We call ourselves the red dot because we are a tiny country with bigger countries as our neighbors. Malaysia, Indonesia, and so on. So our population is about 5 million. The government has a target that they want to reach. I think 6.5 million, if I'm not mistaken, in the next couple of years. Um, Muslims make about 15% of the entire population, 14 or 15% thereabouts, and we're around maybe 600,000 of us, 500, 600,000 of us in Singapore. We are a secular state. You are right, we are not a Muslim state. and Muslims are a minority, as I mentioned, and we are a multi-racial, multi-religious society. We are made up of three main races. So there are the Chinese, which is the majority, and then the Malays, like myself, and then the Indian community. Okay, the Indian is the smallest, but then there's also a group where the government calls the others. So the others are now like any other ethnicity or race that is a part of our community, but they are very, very small in number, right? Muslims are 95% or maybe 90% Malays. So the Malays are the ones who make up the numbers of Muslims in Singapore. The Indian Muslim community is quite significant too. My estimates might be a bit off, but maybe they're about 10 or 15% of the Muslim community. And then there is a very, very small minority of Chinese Muslims. And then again, there are the others, the expats, the foreigners who are working here who are also Muslims. What else? In Singapore, there are about 70 mosques all over the island. There are 6 full-time madrasas, Islamic schools. But there are many private Islamic learning centers, many, like 100 or more. Okay. What else? I don't know what else to share. Oh, yeah. We have our own Sharia court, but the Sharia court here does not deal with every matter. It only focuses on divorce matters and inheritance, and I think a bit about the custody of children. But we also have family court, which usually sometimes it ends up in a family court as well.
Okay, great.
Oh, one more. We also have the registry of Muslim marriages. So we have the registry of marriage, which is for civil marriages, and then the registry of Muslim marriages. This is where the nikah is done according to Islamic rites.
Great. So in terms of geography, location, so Singapore is at the bottom, at the peninsula, the peninsula of Malaysia. If we put that on a map, you mentioned Malay people in Singapore. Can you talk to us about why? I mean, how come there are so many? I mean, more about the history of Singapore. Why is there Malay people in Singapore, and why is it this kind of proportion of people?
Okay. I hope I'll be able to do justice with the answers. Singapore was initially part of Malaysia. That's the history, okay? So, and then they separated in the 1960s, where we became independent. Okay, so the origins of Singapore is that there were a lot more Malays, right? And Malay is actually the national language of Singapore. Even though we are a minority, it is the national language of Singapore. But Islam only came about, no, Islam actually came about much earlier, but they came from Yemen. So there were Yemenis traders and merchants, the businessmen and women, who traveled by sea, and they landed on our shores, and they started to build. So they built mosques, they built madrasas. So if you look at some of the mosques and madrasas, they would be 100 years old. When in fact, Singapore is only, we recently celebrated 58 years old, our national day, right? So it means that they were here much earlier. And the ones who embraced Islam a lot more were the Malays. And so that's how Malays and Islam became synonymous. Like if you're a Malay, there's a 99% chance you're also Muslim. Okay. So yeah, and then but our first president was a Malay Muslim, Yusof Ishaq. But our first prime minister was the late Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. So he's Chinese. And then after that, the development of the country over the last 50 years has been quite tremendous. You've been here, you lived here, you know how technologically advanced and how progressive the society is, how ambitious we are, even though we're a small nation, but how open we are to foreign countries working here, making investments here, moving their headquarters of their companies here, and so on and so forth. So it's a very, very unique identity that Singaporeans have, I believe. And it also makes it even more interesting for Muslims, I guess.
There's a common story that people that, Southeast Asian Muslim Malays that converted, it was due to the good behavior of the Yemeni people. Is that correct? Is that the correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. That's great. And is it the same thing for Indonesia as well, or is it a
I'm
different
not so
story?
sure. I guess we need to check. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll check with my next interviewer. I have someone from Indonesia that's coming up, inshallah. About the organization in Singapore, I've been able to see firsthand like how things are organized. I found that the community is very well, like it's at the image of the country. Basically, things are very well organized. You have everything. I mean, when you enter a mosque, like everything is clean. Everything is you have like the events. You have everything's happening. You don't even seem to need anything in the masjid. Like it seems to be so well organized that for the first year I came, I was like, what can I bring to the masjid? Because it's a different way of thinking of seeing things than in Europe, where you can see the issues and things, but in Singapore I wasn't able to see like apparently the issues, like things were so in the masjid at least things are very well organized.
Because the mosques are under the purview and responsibility of the Islamic Religious Council of Singapore, MUIS.
Okay.
So that's where I used to work at. And so they manage it very well. Every mosque has their own board members. So these are people who are there voluntarily, supporting them, giving advice, inputs. Many of them are professionals, graduates. So they help give the mosque some structure and also some guidance and direction. But every mosque, especially the medium to large size mosque, they have employees. Some of the bigger ones, they have quite a large number of employees, because the mosque also acts as a community center. So people don't just go there for ibadah, for worship. People also go there because that's where they can pay their zakat and that's where they receive their zakat. That's also where they go to learn, they study. That's where they go to meet with friends and family. When there's a big event at the mosque, everybody comes to support and help one another. So it's a very close-knit and tight community, depending on the neighborhoods that the mosque belong to, right? So I think Singaporeans have gotten used to the concept where mosques, at most they need funding. They still need funding, but in terms of physical contributions, like there's a lot, and there are many volunteers also in addition to the staff that are already there. Some mosques, they have social development officers, and they have youth development officers. They have what we call executive imam. So they do more than just lead prayer. They also plan the lessons, the talks, the events in the mosque and things like that. Yeah.
Yes. How do the masajids finance themselves in Singapore? How is it organized? Is it through people giving donations only, or is there something else?
The main source is still donations from the congregation, from the community. And every now and then you would see, the most common was, of course, Friday donations. So every Friday when people come. It goes up significantly during Ramadan because everyone's more generous in Ramadan. And then there are certain projects. Like for example, if a mosque wants to rebuild their kitchen area, then they're going to raise funds for that. A mosque wants to fix their roof, then they're going to raise funds for that. A mosque wants to feed the people during Ramadan, like let's say for iftar, right? They're going to raise funds for that. So sometimes they have specific projects where they will announce and encourage people to donate. If there are major rebuilding projects taking place, there is a fund where MUIS, the Islamic Religious Council of Singapore, they manage. This fund comes from Muslim professionals who work. So every month, let's say if I work in Singapore, then a percentage of my salary is given to this fund. It's called last time it was called the Mosque Building Fund. Now there are additional things. So what happens is, let's say, I contribute $10 every month to this fund, and you multiply this by maybe 200,000 professionals, right? I mean, it's every year. And then, of course, when your salary goes up, you contribute even more. So this fund is only used when there is a new mosque that needs to be built, or when there are major renovations. It doesn't pay off everything 100%, as far as I know. It helps to pay off a part of it, because there are many mosques, right? So it pays a part, but the rest, the mosque still needs to raise its funds.
Yes, I remember when I arrived in Singapore, so they ask you from which ethnicity or which religion do you follow, and if you are Muslim, so they take a portion of your salary, like $10-$20, it depends, or more.
So you contributed as well?
Yeah, I think I could, because they asked me, but I think that they got that from my salary.
I'm sure you did. Yeah. So
that's a good thing.
You've left Singapore, but your investment will remain here, inshallah.
Inshallah, I hope so. So we talked about the organization. Now let's talk about your involvement in the community. So how did it start for you? What's your involvement in the community?
I sit in a lot of non-profit organizations. I sit on the board. For example, one of them is called Association of Muslim Professionals, AMP. So AMP is an organization by professionals who want to do good for the community. So we have a couple of signature programs. For example, one of them is called AFIS, Adopt a Family and Youth Scheme. So people can donate regularly, monthly, and then this goes to a fund where we then support families and youth who need help. They might be either families who are underprivileged, financially challenged, or youth at risk who need some kind of guidance, who needs a mentor, who needs, so that's one. We also have a debt advisory center for Muslims who are struggling with debt. Maybe it could be mortgage they cannot pay, maybe it's even credit card debt, but they get into trouble with it and they need advisory. So we come in, we have experts to support them and to get them out of those issues, because it can be quite burdensome, stressful, overwhelming, and some people, even we hear, they're very suicidal when they are burdened with so much debt, right? So we try to assist there as well. We also have a program where we help some of the inmates in prison or their family members, So many programs done, but AMP mainly wants to become the thought leader when it comes to matters of religion, of faith, and also how Muslims represent and contribute back to the nation. Yeah, so that's AMP.
Okay.
I'll mention a few. So another one is called the Singapore Malay Chamber of Commerce. So this is I'm a new board member there. What they do is that they look into Muslim-owned businesses, and then there's a membership, so people can become a member, and then we help them by organizing training programs, sometimes even trips overseas to network, and there's internationalization. That's helping local businesses to be more established here. We also give out a special certificate called the Muslim-owned establishment. Because in Singapore, we have the halal certificate, which is very powerful. I'm sure you've seen it before. But there's also another option for businesses that are Muslim-owned. They can actually just go to SMCCI and get the Muslim-owned establishment endorsement. Of course, there's training and all of those things to be done. There's also the SMCCI Academy. This is where a lot of the training is being done. So that's another one. But the most recent one also is that I was appointed the president of Pergas. So what is Pergas? Pergas is the Association of Islamic Religious Scholars and Teachers of Singapore. So in this organization, all of its members are mainly those who study Islam up to the point of a diploma or degree, right? So we have ordinary members, we have associate members, right? In Singapore, there are up to 5,000 registered Islamic teachers. So these are certified by MUIS. Okay? So what Pergas does is that Pergas acts a bit more like a union to support the Asatizahs, to look after the welfare of the Asatidah, the Islamic teachers. We also have our own programs for the development, for the upskilling, help them to improve the skills, and so on and so forth. A lot of the zakat funds we collect is also to be distributed either for scholarship, for some of them who want to pursue postgraduate studies, for bursaries, for those who are about to go and pursue their degree, and even for those who are no longer able to work anymore because they are unwell, they're too old, and so we support them with some funds. That's a big one. But and there are a few other things. For example, I also on the weekends I solemnize couples. So this is part of the ROMM that I mentioned earlier, Registry of Muslim Marriages. I also sit on the Fatwa Committee in Singapore, as an associate member. Yeah, so those are some of the things.
That's a lot. Is it easy for you to do all of that? How do you organize yourself?
Yeah, I need your dua, brother. I need your dua, then I can.
I'll make it easy for you.
I mean, so I guess I manage it accordingly. Most of these are involvements that require me to be present, let's say, once or twice a month. So it's not too heavy. But of course, the one where I'm holding as president is a bit more, requires a bit more of my commitment. Yeah.
What are the things that are very dear to you, that are important to you? Do you have anything among all of what you do, something that you really want to have, a topic or something where you want to really have an impact in particular, or due to affinities or something?
There are many. One of it is, as the president of Pergas, one of the key areas that we want to look into is to see how we can raise the quality of our Islamic teachers so that they can start to earn a better salary and a better pay. Okay? So if we were to put the teachers in our public schools compared to our religious teachers teaching in the madrasa, their salary is very far off. They are not paid enough. So we want to see how we can help in whatever way. I believe that the solution is not so straightforward because this is a problem that's been around for decades. As long as you're a religious teacher, people don't value you as much. People are not as willing to pay. But I think it's a two-way problem where the Islamic teachers, the religious teachers need to also look at themselves and ask, how can I upgrade myself, my skills, my thinking, and also my contributions, so that the community starts to see the real value that we can bring, we can offer. But like I said, it requires like a whole ecosystem to change, to step up, to improve, in order for this to become a reality. Yeah,
Yes, yes. I
it's
think
still a
it's
long
a
journey.
general thing, not only in Singapore. But that's good to see that we have the similar struggles. What are other concerns that you can see specifically in the Singaporean community, like specifically to your community? What other concerns
Um,
that you can see among the youth, among the Muslim
mm.
population, the
I
challenges?
also, yeah, I also volunteer with the Singapore prisons. So I go to the prisons every quarter to meet
Mm-hmm.
with the inmates. This is, however, not limited to the Muslim inmates, right? It's everyone. I see everyone.
Mm-hmm.
However, what I always am informed is that um, the Muslims, unfortunately, we even though we are the minority in the prisons, we represent the majority.
I see.
So there's an imbalance, you know. And for me, I focus mainly on those who are drug abusers. So, you know, they take drugs and, you know, they got caught and now they're there. Some of them are, actually, many of them are repeat offenders. So it's not their first time where they keep coming
Mm-hmm.
back. So once again, this is something where even Pergas and AMP that I mentioned earlier, we are looking into this matter. We want to see how we can support. Because as much as we say that, oh, it depends on the person. If they really want to change, they will not do it again. But I think we must understand also the environment that they're in, their
Mm-hmm.
friends, their contacts, you know, their neighborhood. And there are many contributing factors, right? And and then how can we step in to intervene and ensure that it does not become a vicious cycle? Because
Yes.
sometimes they become that way because their parents were like that too. So
Mm-hmm.
and they see this every day at home. And now they are now in prison. What if it's their children next? We don't want that, right? We want to put
Mm-hmm.
an end to it so that it does not continue, it does not get passed down.
Yes.
So this is not just a Muslim community issue per se, even though I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned that we do represent it largely. The
Mm-hmm.
government of Singapore takes this matter very, very seriously. They've invested a lot of resources into this. I
Mm-hmm.
know for a fact because I've been a part of some of them as well. Um, Helping these inmates when they come out, they are properly supported, they are given new skills, they can get employment because sometimes that's the
Mm-hmm.
tough part. They cannot get employed, then they get stressed again, and then they go to the drugs again, right?
Yes.
So that's another area perhaps that you know we are all looking into closely
Mm.
and see how we can help.
Okay. Uh, Earlier we mentioned that there are different communities living together in Singapore, and they, um, in general, live very peacefully, alhamdulillah, which is a very good thing. Do you think that there are like different kind of mindsets around in the different communities? Uh, I mean, the stereotypes are that Chinese are more business oriented, and you can have this kind of stereotypes. Like, do you have different mindsets around different communities and maybe that there is something that need to be changed in the Muslim community? Trying to do.
I think stereotypes do exist. We cannot be
Mm-hmm.
in denial. But what's more important at the moment, I feel, is that we must also acknowledge that we are generally a very, very peaceful country,
Yes,
right? Even
that's
though we
very
have
true.
lots of differences. Yeah, you lived here for a while, so you
Yeah.
know. And I think you can only appreciate it. I think a lot of Singaporeans sometimes we don't appreciate this enough
Mm-hmm.
because we don't travel enough. We don't look at how other Muslims in other countries as minorities, they are not
Mm-hmm.
treated as nicely, right? So we are given a lot of freedom to practice our faith. Yeah, like I said, the mosques and everything. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
there are still some challenges. You know, if you live in a world where there are no challenges, there must be something wrong somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's too easy. So our challenge is that we may not get everything, but I think a big chunk of what we normally need to do, the basic needs, they are all pretty much covered. You know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
even one of the big announcements made by the government last year, last year's National Day, was allowing our nurses in hospitals to wear the hijab. Because for the longest time, they were not allowed to wear the hijab. So, things like this give the Muslims some recognition, and also it gives some of us also hope that that the nation, the government actually cares about us and is concerned about what we want as well. But because we live in a multi-religious country, there are 10 recognized religions in Singapore, multiracial society, we must always remember to be respectful to one another, right? And if you demand a lot, and then you got to also contribute as much. I think it's a give and take world that we live in today. So yeah, those are some things.
Well, that's good. That's good. I see that in general things are getting better and better for the Muslim community. As you mentioned, there are some laws that goes from time to time that gives even more freedom, even though compared to other countries, it's like already like a very high degree of freedom, but it's getting even better, alhamdulillah. You are, most of the listeners in French don't even know you, but you are quite famous in Singapore and also maybe in Malaysia and maybe in Brunei as well. Why did this? Why did you become so famous in the region? Due to which kind of work?
Why did I become so famous? I don't know. I think, alhamdulillah, it was mainly through my book. I think my books really, really helped. It was by accident too, I guess. It wasn't really, I'm writing books so that I can become famous. No such thing, right? I just wrote the books because I wanted to share whatever I wanted to share. It's just perhaps that my books were a bit unique in terms of how it was written, the approach, the tone that I used to write the books. And because most of my books are written as a way to encourage people. For example, Call Upon Him is to encourage people to not lose hope and continuously make dua to Allah, right? To understand that there is a time delay sometimes, and there's always hikmah and wisdom behind any delay. And to internalize whatever supplications and requests that you make to God, to really understand what they mean and whether they are meaningful to you in any way, right? And many other things. In the book, The Art of Letting God, it's really about learning how to let go, learning how to forgive, learning how to surrender your affairs to Allah. It's really about tawakkul. Because sometimes we get so obsessed about outcomes and results when the only thing we should be obsessed about is actually the work that we do. The results is all, we leave it to Allah, right? Allah decides whether the outcome is going to be a certain way or the other way around. So you plan properly, you work properly, you give it your best, and then once you are done, you leave the rest to Allah. So that book is probably the most popular of them all. It also talks about forgiveness and things like that. And then the third book is called You Are Loved. So the premise of this book is that many people in the world actually do not feel loved. And they don't even realize this. They have problems, they're depressed, they're always very anxious about everything. They are easily agitated, they have anger issues. They go on from one marriage to another marriage. They lose all of their friends. There's so many things people go through, not realizing that at the core of it is really because they do not feel loved. And when, many people say that when they read this book, within the first chapter, they're already crying. A lot of people say stuff like cry. Maybe it's because it connects with them at some area of their life. They can relate to it very well. But so these are examples of the first three books I've written that has probably resonated very, very strongly with my readers. And as a result, they then tell their friends about it, or they'll post on social media about it. Some of them gave my books to celebrities, and then they have millions of followers, and then they repost it, and that's how it got, it just became viral.
Okay. How did you come to, study in Al-Azhar in Egypt? To writing books, and usually the common way when you study at Al-Azhar is more like just teaching, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
in madrasas or being an imam or something like that. But you have a very
Yeah.
different path.
Yeah, my story that I shared during our trip in Bali, right, Abdurrahman, was that when I was about to graduate from Al-Azhar, I told myself, or I asked myself, what do I want to do after this, after I'm done? And the most common thing for graduates of Islamic universities is to come back to Singapore and become an ustaz. An ustaz is like a religious teacher in Singapore, that's what we call it. So, but I told myself, I don't want to be just like any other ustaz. I wanted to be different in a good way, you know. So I asked myself, how can I be different? And Islam was predominantly taught to the community using the Malay language. For the longest time, it's always been taught in Malay. But more and more Singaporeans, especially the younger ones, they are more comfortable in English, but they didn't have enough options. So because at that moment I felt like I was a bit more comfortable to speak in English, a bit more fluent than most of my peers back then, I decided to start Safinah Institute, the one that I shared earlier, and said, you know what, I'm just gonna do this instead. And after a couple of years of doing it, I thought to myself, maybe I should write some of the things that I've been teaching and compile it into a book. And the first book was written when my wife and I were expecting our first child. Suddenly, when you have your first child, Abdurrahman, you have one child, right? Or two?
Yes, one,
yeah.
One daughter.
So when you have your first child, you do start thinking differently, right, about life. It's like, what kind of legacy do I want to leave behind for my child, right? So part of me was somewhat concerned, like, what if something were to happen to me and my daughter wouldn't know me properly, know me well enough. So I thought that maybe I should write and then publish a book. And even if I'm gone, and my daughter will be able to read the book and she can understand me, my perspectives, my values a bit more through the book. So that's how it was initially started. But then after a while, I had other goals of writing a book. I wanted to help people get over grief, difficulty, hardship, stress, depression. That's why I wrote The Art of Letting God. And then I wanted to help people who do not feel loved. That's why I wrote You Are Loved. So yeah, after that, there were more specific goals.
Interesting. We are reaching the end of the interview. I still have a couple of questions to finish, but before that, can we also talk about your involvement in the corporate training? I think that's something we didn't touch. Yeah. So you travel a lot due to that. So can you explain to us?
Yeah. So Alhamdulillah, I've been getting a lot of engagements with corporations. So I do corporate training, but the unique value proposition for me is that I have an Islamic degree. So even though it's corporate training, people expect me to either also touch from the Islamic perspective on certain topics, let's say on leadership, on overcoming stress, on mindfulness at the workplace. So because they think, oh, this is Ustaz Mizi, so we have to ask him to also do this, right? Because other trainers, they don't have the same background as I do. So they like that. But even when there are certain big companies where they say, oh, but Ustaz, we have non-Muslim staff as well. Can you maybe tone it down a bit, but maybe keep it more spiritual? And I say, yeah, sure, I can do that. So for example, in those kind of trainings, I don't necessarily use too many Quranic verses or hadiths, but I still emphasize on the values and the principles that Islam teaches and how they can apply it at the workplace. So I've done, alhamdulillah, like banks, oil and gas companies, fashion brands, insurance companies, things like that, telco companies. Yeah, I've done quite a bit, alhamdulillah.
Okay, great. And is this like, so what exactly are they looking for in this kind of training, like leadership? Is this something that is common in Southeast Asia to have this kind of training regularly?
Yeah, it is. They do For example, training is one of them. The ones I mentioned earlier about mindfulness, about overcoming stress, rising above difficult phases in the work life, finding that so-called balance. There's something a lot of people want to learn about. Yeah, so these are some of the more popular topics that are often chosen. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Mizi. Before I ask the question of the end of the podcast, do you have anything or any message you want to add, or something we did not mention, maybe?
I don't know. I wish I could interview you. Maybe another time I can interview you instead.
Inshallah, no problem. Whenever you want.
I've never been to France before, but I do hear a lot about the French Muslims. Sometimes very inspiring, amazing things, but sometimes I feel sad also with some of the news. I take every news I hear with a pinch of salt because it doesn't usually represent the full reality. Like how people hear stuff about Singapore, that's not true, right? That's not true. Like maybe a lot of what I hear also is not accurate. So hopefully that I will get a chance to learn more about the French Muslim community one day, inshallah. And yeah, maybe even travel there, inshallah.
Yeah, you're welcome. Let me know whenever you're planning to travel. Well, I'll be sure you'll be welcomed very well, inshallah. Thank you so much, Mizi. What's the skill that you find the most useful in your daily life?
Normally I would say writing, but I think today I'm going to say reflection. You need to know how to self-reflect, and it's a skill. Because some people, when they go back home at the end of the day, before they sleep, they think about their day, they reflect, but it doesn't benefit them. Meaning, when they think about how difficult the day went and how harsh their boss or their client was towards them, they just get more and more angrier, and they lash out, and they start scolding their family members because they're taking it out on their family. Or maybe they plot against people who they think don't like them the next day in the office. To me, that's not real reflection. It's a real self-reflection. Muhasabah is when you look back and ask yourself, how can I be better? How can I improve? When somebody says something, don't make a big deal out of it to the point where you lose focus of the real value that the person is trying to give you in terms of feedback. It's often, yeah, that's actually one of the things I teach, about don't take feedback at work personally, because a lot of times it's just purely professional, to constructive. So every day there's always something that happens. So when you take a moment to reflect at the end of your day and at the beginning of your day, even if you wake up and you think first, how was everything? Did I learn anything from your last night's reflection? Then you are able to start off your day with a more positive mindset. You are more eager to learn, and your mind is so much more receptive towards whatever the world has to offer. Yeah.
Any tip on how to have a efficient reflection? Usually when I reflect before sleeping, I tend to forget when I wake up.
Yeah, if you notice yourself forgetting a lot easily, then of course you should write it down. Yeah, write it down. But the real key to having a good reflection is the quality of the questions you ask yourself. If you ask yourself something like, why did this happen to me? Why not somebody else? Right? That's not helpful, right? But if you ask yourself, what was God probably trying to teach me? What could I learn so that I don't repeat the same mistake again? So the quality of your questions matter greatly in determining how effective your reflective session was.
Makes sense. Thank you, Ustad.
No worries.
What's the thing that you prefer in your day-to-day activity? What's the thing that you like the most?
To be honest, it's about going back home and spending time with my kids, my wife. I think that's the most valuable because I have long days usually, you know.
Mm.
Very rarely do I have a short working day, so it's very long days. And then travel a lot. So when I get to come back home and meet everyone, I feel much more recharged.
Mm. Great. Alhamdulillah. Do you have routines? I know that you have very busy schedule. Do you have routines that you do in your day to day or weekly or whatever that keeps you, uh, that helps you to rejuvenate yourself or help you progress?
Every morning, it's good to have, whenever I have breakfast in the morning, I would go somewhere and sit on my own. I like to sit on my own and gather my thoughts and plan for the week, plan for the day.
Mhm.
Uh, I'm quite introverted as a person, so I don't really
Yeah.
need to have lots of human interactions.
We are
I
the
know
same.
that I'm gonna, yeah,
That's
I
why
know I'm
we
going
have
to have
podcast, but yeah,
I know I am going to have a lot of interactions throughout the day. So the morning
yeah.
time is where I just spend time on my own. I
Mm,
have my coffee and then just think, and then sometimes I write stuff down so that I'm quite clear about what I want to do.
mm,
So it's important to do that, I guess.
mm,
I think the other routines would be more spiritual. If you can do your sunnah prayers, like Salatul Duha, if you can do your tahajjud every now and then, um, if you can make it a point to go to the mosque on other days, not just on Fridays, if you can, try to do
mm,
that because there's a certain kind of peace and serenity that comes from connecting with our Creator
mm.
and being reminded of our purpose on earth.
Great, thank you. Usually, I ask questions about book recommendations. I think I'll put some of your books in the description, inshallah. But do you have any additional book, maybe something that you find really inspiring and helpful to you?
I grew up in my okay, so when I was a kid in school, I really lacked self-esteem and self-confidence. So when I turned 18, I
Mm-hmm.
started going to the library and bookstores, and I started investing a lot in books. So the books that I read are normally like personal development books, and some of them would be like Anthony Robbins, um, his books, Stephen Covey, all of his books, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So there are a lot of good books out there that talk about all of these things. I hope that my books will be able to help people in the same way, or
Mm-hmm.
even better, inshallah, in the future. Yeah.
Jazakallah khairan. If our listeners wants to follow your work, follow what you're doing, and even I know that you're really busy, but if they have a maybe like they want to ask you a question, is that possible?
Yeah, you can follow me, inshallah, on Instagram. I'm most active there. Mizi
Mm-hmm.
Wahid, Miziwahid.
Mm-hmm.
On Twitter, I'm kind of active as well. Mizi
Okay,
underscore Wahid.
it's now X,
Um,
but yeah.
yeah, now X, not Twitter anymore. Um, yeah, Facebook, not so active. I'm not active at all on TikTok. And yeah, that's about it, I guess. I was active on Clubhouse, but I think everybody's left Clubhouse already.
Yeah, I think it's
Um,
all thing now.
Threads as well. Threads, I was there, and then suddenly, everybody's left Threads. So
Yeah, Threads, that was a short, yeah,
very
lesson.
short lifespan.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah. All right, so I'll put your Instagram and your Twitter slash X account inshallah in the
Thank
bio.
you.
Thank you so much, Wahid, for your time today. I really enjoyed talking to you. I hope we can meet again, maybe in the next GMW event. Maybe if you're there, or if I come, inshallah. Yeah, I ask Allah to add to put barakah in you and your
I
family
mean,
and your surroundings and
I'm,
your work, and that
I'm,
He makes it easy for you to to do all of what you're doing and in a
I'm,
very good manner, inshallah, with the best of the intention.
thank you so much, Ibrahim. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mizi. I'll see you again, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.